was different. Better if I'm on, like here, or better if I'm up on stage? Or you're like, we don't care, we just want to see the
We
art?
don't care.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay, for those of you who I don't know, my name is Alejo Benedetti. I'm curator of contemporary art at Crystal Bridges and The Momentary. And we're gonna spend about the next hour talking about Chuck Ramirez, Ordinary Wonders, which is an exhibition that will be opening this summer. So as soon as the expansion opens, we will start deinstalling everything over here, and we're going to, in the National Geographic space, we're going to install Chuck Ramirez. In the JR space, we're going to be installing an exhibition by Lucy Sparrow, which Laura is going to talk about after I am done talking. And so y'all have basically like 2 really exciting hours to talk all about stuff. Say that affectionately, stuff. So Chuck Ramirez, do we have any Texans in the training? Oh, I love this, like, kind of. Great. Yeah, you've been to Texas before. Everybody's been to Texas. Okay. Chuck Ramirez was from Texas. He specifically was from San Antonio. He is so very San Antonio. He passed away in 2010, but he was very involved in his community leading up to his death. And even to this day, people in San Antonio within the art world, they know who Chuck Ramirez is, or they know his work. And in Texas more broadly, he's still very well known. As you start to get further afield, as you get more onto the sort of national stage, even though he has work in the collection of the Whitney, of the Smithsonian, of all of these major museums across the United States, he's not as well known. And one of the things that's really wild is that in 2018, I believe, there was a big exhibition of Chuck Ramirez's work at the McNay, which is a museum in San Antonio. And there's a big retrospective of his work. It was the first big retrospective of his work, and it did not travel. There has not been, until now, a major exhibition of Chuck Ramirez's work outside of the state of Texas. So this is a cool thing that we are able to do, and sort of selfishly, as the curator working on it, because that big exhibition happened just a couple years ago, you don't have to feel like this needs to be the retrospective. A lot of that work has been done, so it frees us up to tell stories the way that Chuck Ramirez told stories, which is specifically focused on his love of stuff. So again, I say stuff because he loved things. He loved how we interacted with things. He loved the associations that we have with the objects around us. And he came by this naturally because for 14 years before he really focused on his art practice, he worked for H-E-B, which is a grocery store in Texas. And he was a graphic designer and art director for H-E-B. And so the way that he would approach these products is that he would make them look glamorous, he would make them look desirable. These are the types of things that if he's doing his job well, he is selling objects to people. And so what you see when you start to look at his practice is that that training and that focus for 14 years on doing that is still there. That is a language that he speaks really fluently, and it's something that comes out in the work. But what's especially exciting is that now when he shifts over, starting like mid-90s, when he shifts over to specifically making art, he shifts the way that he thinks about these products. It isn't like we're going to photograph these beautifully so that we can sell them. It's because we're going to photograph these things beautifully because the objects that we consume, the objects that we surround ourselves with, the things that are just part of our life, are a reflection of who we are. And so this becomes the kind of guiding premise of how he approaches the work that he does for the next, for the remainder of his life. So, with that, I want to give give you a sense of the scale. This is from, well, on the right, this is from the show that was at the Matinee. So these are big photographs. And he often will work in series. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But to give you a sense of how he would approach this, if you look at the work that's on the left, this is a work called What a Cup. And for any of the Texans or just Southerners in the room, what a burger! Yes, absolutely, what a burger! And this is trash. I mean, this is just like in a disposable Whataburger cup, and yet the artistry comes in because the way that he sets this up, it's very simply staged, right? Against a white backdrop, goes away. All you're seeing really is this cup, and yet he doesn't position it so that we see the big iconic W Whataburger logo. He shifts it because on the back of those cups, there's a little tiny message that's hard to see on this screen, but I promise when it's installed, you will see this very easily. And it says, "When I am empty, please dispose of me properly," which is a funny thing. One of the things that runs through this exhibition, through Chuck's practice, is that there is a dry humor that is always present. So feel free, as we are clicking through, if you're seeing something that he's exalting in this way, and you're kind of like, well, that's funny. Yeah, like feel free to laugh a little bit. This is part of it, because what he's doing with this is that he's taking this piece of trash, this thing that just gets cast aside, and yet he's positioning it in a way, he's turning it so that all of a sudden you're having this kind of existential moment as you are looking at a Whataburger cup, and he's doing it with the simplest of gestures. And this is a recurring theme with him, that he is able to, through the objects that he selects, through the ways that he presents them, and then oftentimes through these things being part of a series, he is able to drive home certain ideas. So, yeah.
And it's everything where he was. You know, HEB was in Victoria before it was in San Antonio, and Victoria is halfway between San Antonio and Corpus. Whataburger started in Corpus Christi in 1951. I mean, it was just part of what he grew up with.
This is he was Texas through and through.
Yeah.
And it comes out in the work. It comes out in the way that he would show up for his community, and the way that his community would show up for him, and in the selection of things like a Whataburger cup, which now Whataburger's reach has certainly exceeded just Texas, but at the time, it was very much specifically a Texas thing.
That's Texas orange too.
And that's Texas orange. Hook 'em horns. I didn't go to UT.
We could tell.
You can tell. I can't tell if that's a dig or not. I don't know. Okay, so the exhibition is organized into 4 big sections. We're going to talk about all of them. I'm going to give some examples in each. But it starts with shelf life, goes to lovely stuff, evidence of life, and what remains. And again, what's centered in all of these sections is a type of association with specific objects. And so as we walk through, you will understand how these kind of start to unfold as we're progressing. This also gives you just kind of a rough sense of how each of these different objects fits into the different space. This gives you a better sense of what you're looking at. This is, again, the lobby gallery and gallery 1 here at the Momentary. And teeny tiny pictures of how it actually, so take your notes really quickly, make sure you get all of that, and then this is just stage set here. Okay. The first section, as you first walk into the lobby gallery, is called Shelf Life. And part of the thinking behind this first section, the objects that are in here are probably like the closest that we will be to the ways that he would work as an art director or as a graphic designer. the principles that he's using, the types of objects that he's presenting there, they are presented in a way that feels like these could have been product shots for his day job. And what happens, and what you start to see, is that we did not want to start the exhibition with like, here's a bio of Chuck Ramirez. And part of the reason not to do that is because the objects that Chuck Ramirez would photograph, they all, in one way or another, would become portraits of different people, but oftentimes they would become self-portraits. And so when we walk into this first gallery, the types of objects that we're seeing, so yes, the Whataburger cup is in this space, and this is one of these ways that he's nodding to, he's a Texan, he's proud of it, and you're seeing that as he's also thinking about some really heavy topics, things like mortality, but also thinking about how he approaches that in a way that feels playful and a little more approachable. But as you look at the work that's on the left, this is from a series called Long-Term Survivor. This is a work called Cocktail. And so in the early 90s, Chuck Ramirez, who's openly gay, a friend of his said, hey, we should go and we really should get tested for HIV. And he was a little reticent to do this, but he says, okay. So he goes, he gets tested, he finds out that he's HIV positive. And this is a transitional moment for him. It is a moment where he realizes, I have been an art director for HEB for 14 years, and it is not what I want to be doing. It is the way that I make a living, but it's not how I live. And so it's a transitional moment for him, and he decides, okay, I'm going to completely commit myself to my art making practice. And so he does, and he jumps into it, and it's not with this work. But this is part of a bigger series that he does where he's reflecting on how he continues to live, and the way that he lives is through this cocktail of different medicines that are helping him perceive as if everything is completely normal. And so he presents it in a way that this is this pill keeper, Monday through Sunday, and presented in this way that is supposed to feel repetitive. It's supposed to feel like every day I wake up and I do this, and every day I wake up and this just becomes part of my daily life. And he's presenting it in a way that feels like a little funny, titling it Cocktail. And then when he would present this, the first time he presented this, it was this photograph, but then it was this photograph next to that same photograph, next to that same photograph, next to that same photograph, because he's speaking to the repetition of all of this, that he is somebody who comes from a world of multiples. He comes from a world of tons of different things, and repetitively doing these things over and over and over again. And so series become important to him. He defines differences, and he thinks about the sameness of things because he's able to present things multiple times over with small variations, or in this case, no variations. This is a very specific regimen that he sticks to, but it enables him to do everything else. And he lives his life until 2010. He does not die as a result of complications of HIV. It is completely unrelated. So he continues to live his life, and he just lives it with this as part of it, as an important part of it, but not as the focus. And so as we are setting this up, part of the conversation that we wanted to introduce in Shelf Life in the sort of opening section was, okay, we're going to introduce this, we're going to talk about how his HIV status was part of who he was, it became part of his life, it became a moment when he realized, okay, this is a transition for me, but it did not define the work that he would make. And in fact, it only shows up a handful of times throughout his career in terms of the focus and the commentary that he's making through his work. So, if this is one of the works that's in this space, another work that's in here is this one, Coconut. And this series of works, these three works, are almost always presented together, and we are presenting them together. And all of this comes about because Chuck Ramirez was a Chicano artist, but he had a dad that was Mexican, a mom that was white, and he appeared very white. In fact, his grandparents would call him the blonde Ramirez, and this is how they would just refer to him. And so his relationship to his identity was interesting, specifically his Latino identity, because he would say, this is me. He was very proud of being Mexican. He had a deep, close relationship with his grandmother, and yet, growing up in San Antonio and not looking Mexican, so to speak, was a complicated relationship to his own identity. And so there's a slur that happens, or that is sometimes used, talking about a coconut, and that you would be white on the inside and brown on the outside. And so he does this series actually after there was an exhibition that he was part of, and some of the other artists that were also part of this exhibition were Chicano, but were not identified as being Chicano enough, which he thought was a ridiculous thing to say, about as ridiculous as like this slur about coconuts. And so he does this series, makes it the sort of frontis work of the next exhibition that he does in San Antonio, just to kind of be like, yeah, all right, I hear you, but like we can like hear it, see it, and let's move on. And so it is also, as we're building this bigger idea of who is Chuck Ramirez as you walk in, you have the Whataburger cup, you have the cocktail, you have the coconut, and you have running through all of it this kind of cheeky way that he is winking at the reality there, and that like all of it is serious topics, but it's not presented in a way that feels so heavy. And this becomes his calling card as he really establishes himself and as he continues to move through as an artist. Any questions before we jump into the...
Is there something in Crystal Bridges' collection of his?
There is.
So familiar. I mean, not this, but
We do not have Chuck Ramirez in the collection yet. It's always how I like to frame that. But maybe it just feels familiar because this is the language that he's using.
well, and I'm familiar with Linda in San Antonio. But I'm so excited.
Good, I'm excited as well. Okay, so moving from the lobby gallery, as you move into the northmost end of Gallery 1, you will move into a space that we're calling Lovely Stuff. And there are a lot of really great objects in this space. I wish I could talk about all of them, but I'm only going to talk about 2. So what you see as you first come around that corner, as you are peering down that hallway at the end of the wall, is a series of works that he calls the purse portraits. And this particular purse portrait is what you will see truly as you are on your sightline right across the way. And it's a play here. He's thinking, in this whole section, we're really thinking about how the types of things that we surround ourselves with get significance and they get value and they have meaning, and it comes from a variety of different places. And one of those places is from just our proximity to it. So it's funny that one of the things that we talk about is like, oh, you should never go through a woman's purse. This is, right, like this is a phrase, this is a thing, like, don't do that. And so he's thinking about that. He's also thinking about the fact that, like, you could not leave the house without, like, you know, gotta have my wallet, gotta have my keys, gotta have my chapstick, like I couldn't, like, I cannot make it through the day without that. And so he does this series where he goes to a variety of different women, and not just women, it's women and men as well. And he goes and he says, hey, can I photograph the contents of your purse? such a personal thing to ask, right? Like it's
Yeah.
such a, because there is at least a perceived intimacy. And the intimacy is not because like, it's not because the Camel cigarettes are particularly valuable or secretive, or that, you know, in this case, this person is reading My Life with Charles Manson, which is what you're seeing, one of those books that's in there. It's not that that is particularly personal. It's just that there is an understanding that because of proximity, because we wear these things on our person, that these things are personal and they are significant. And again, we should not rifle through because that tells us something about that person. And so the way that he does this is so simple. He just says, can I take a picture of the contents of your purse? I say, sure. And he opens it up. He stages it a little bit so that it doesn't just look like he's photographing into like a black hole. And then he takes the photograph and then he titles it. Again, all of them are based on one of the things that's like inside the person and then the person's name. And this, again, is such a simple gesture, but again, the thinking that's sort of the connective tissue here is that he's focused specifically on how people are relating to different objects. And so it's funny because this is the opening note as you walk into the space. And then as you shift just to the right, you'll see a series of works. This is actually the earliest series of works that he did, which was called Dust Collections and Other Tchotchkes. And this one in particular, we have a few of them that will be on view, but this one in particular I really like just because it's a Bronco. But it's a ceramic Bronco, and this, I mean, I think everybody in this room knows that like this is wildly expensive. Oh, it's not. It's not expensive at all. This is the sort of thing that costs very little to purchase, and yet it's probably been sitting on your grandmother's mantle for the past 40 years. You could not imagine her mantle without that. It becomes part of who she is, it becomes part of her home, and the dust that starts to collect on top of this tchotchke is a signifier of just how significant it is, because it signals a passage of time, it signals an amount of presence that we have. And so as we're thinking through, like, okay, how are people relating to different objects and how do we imbue significance into something? There's a good chance that if your grandmother passes away and you know you see like, oh, the Bronco that's always been there, it's been there since I was a kid, it may have some sort of newfound significance to you and that you want to hang on to. And again, it's nothing, it costs nothing, and yet it has tremendous significance. So this is part of what he's getting to. It's like, how do we measure this type of significance that different objects can have? And it could be from our proximity to them, it could be from repetition, it could be just from literally sitting on, like in somebody's house for enough time. And so these are the types of things that he's trying to pry at as he sets up these different series throughout this space. Any questions about this? Okay, as we move into the next section, and this one is called Evidence of Life. And Evidence of Life takes up all of this C section right here, and then about half of D. But you'll see how D starts to, how the series start to kind of bleed into the final series as well, which we'll talk about. But I want to talk about this broom. So there's a series of works, well, I should say, Evidence of Life really is focused on this idea that he's photographing objects. He's rarely photographing people. I can like count on one hand the number of times that Chuck Ramirez actually photographed people in his work. And yet, it's always about people. It's always about life, and it's always about how we have this sort of evidence of that presence. And so in the Broom series, which on its own, this one broom, this orange half broom, maybe doesn't look so miraculous, but it's part of a series. And the series came about because he took a trip down to Mexico, just on vacation, and he kept seeing these shopkeepers that were out there and sweeping, just sweeping like crazy every morning, like sweeping out. And he would look at these brooms that these folks were using, and they had their own personalities. You could tell that these were brooms that had been well used. And when you start to see this, so he goes up to each of these shopkeepers and he says, hey, strange question. Can I buy your broom from you? And they, of course, were like, that's real weird. This is my broom. Why would you want this? And he said, well, I'm an artist, and that usually did the trick. And so he would say, hey, can I buy this broom from you? And so then he has this whole like stack of brooms that he takes back to San Antonio with him so that he can photograph. And all that he's doing is just upending them, turning them up, and then you start to see it like this. And when you see a broom presented like this, all of a sudden, it's not just the sort of bristles that are there. It feels like, oh, that's like an amazing coif of hair that's going on. There is this way that we can't help it. We start to personify these objects, and it's fitting that we start to do that. We start to see it as like, oh, that's a head, and that's like a very skinny body. And we can't help but to do that, and it doesn't hurt that these have hours and hours and hours of people engaging with them and imbuing themselves into these objects, these otherwise banal objects. And I say that he works in series, and the series are significant because this is just a rendering, but you can see along that back wall, when you see that many, then you start to think like, oh, okay, well, yeah, this one definitely has a sort of a coif of hair. This one is more of a buzz cut. This one, and so we start to create these stories about these inanimate objects. But again, what's playing in the background for us is this idea that like, oh yeah, but the way that it got this way is because somebody has engaged with it and somebody has enacted with it. So going back to the other work that I had up there, this is part of a series called Piñatas. And this particular piñata, named Ethel, Ethel was the person whose birthday it was when. Okay, so that's how we got to Ethel. But all of the piñatas that are part of the series look kind of like this. They're different designs, but they clearly have already been the focus of some sort of celebration, because they are dismembered. They are missing a head or like split open. The candy is all gone. And this is a funny thing, because piñatas are funny things, because here's this vessel that has this whole tradition that's rooted in like making and painstakingly going and doing this and like paper picada, and you're going and you're putting this onto the surface of this creation. So much love that goes into it. And then you fill it up with a whole bunch of goodies, and then you string it up and you say, all right, go hit it. And everybody, like, as soon as you hit it, everybody cheers. And then you break it open, and then all the goodies spill out everywhere. And like every like child and like grown child is actually like in there, like trying to get like fistfuls of candy and delightful stuff. And so it is a bizarre thing, because it is a celebration that is based in like all of this, making all this love. But it's a celebration that's also celebrating a very violent act. And it's playful violence, but it's also a wild thing that we like to sit back and look at that and be like, yeah, that's a strange thing for us to be celebrating. Like, yeah, go beat the heck out of that thing, and we're all gonna cheer for you. And so there's a funny dissonance that starts to happen. And when it's presented this way, when we're seeing like this like slightly dismembered piñata, it's supposed to feel a little strange, It's also supposed to feel a little funny because we know about piñatas. We know what piñatas are. We know like that, what that tradition is like. And it's also this way that he can grasp at celebration, and he can grasp at joy, and he can align the work that he's making with the sense of celebration, of joyousness. And so there are these ways that he is layering these different objects. And again, this is a thing that at this point, while like your abuela might have like previously gone and made these one by one, like all by hand, all of the ones that are part of this series are the kind that you would go to HEB or you would go to Walmart and you would buy them pre-made, big assembly line, and then you fill it up with candy that gets made on a big assembly line. And so it's like this whole thing that is also that it has this beautiful tradition that's like very handmade, very personal, that has also been monetized. And so he's not oblivious to this, and in fact, he's thinking about how this has become a mass-produced product, and it's also something that can still have significance and can still have this very personal touch to it and these memories that we associate with it, but it's also something that is in a lot of ways devoid of the sort of heartfelt gesture that we often associate with, like, oh, like you're, like some loved one is making this for you. So all of this brings us into the final section, which is called What Remains. And so again, What Remains picks up in D over here, and it starts with this series on the right called 7 Days, which we'll talk about in a second. But really, the Piñata series is getting into this. It's getting into the final section, so there's a little bit of porousness that happens as we sort of move from one section into the next. So the 7 Days series is a series of 7 works, and they seem a little bit different because they're not just against a white backdrop. This is not the only time that he does this, but it is the only time that he does this in this particular exhibition. But what he's specifically focused on, so if the piñatas were about celebration, but they were about some other things, this is also about celebration, but it's about some other things. And what you see in all 7 of these different photographs is that you know that you have just arrived after that party has ended. That when you look at this, even if it didn't say birthday party, you can tell that this is a child's birthday party. There are ways that it's like, it's the Mountain Dew and the Big Red, it's the Pokemon tablecloth that is over there, it's the little tiny cowboy hats, like the party favorite cowboy hats. How like Texas is that to be like, we don't do like the pointy hats, we just do like, these are just plastic cowboy hats. It's all of these different things, and this is staged in this way so that we know that we have just missed it, but we've just missed like the height of elation. And what's cool to see with this series is that we know so much about who was here. We know so much about who just enjoyed this party. And this one, again, we start telling these stories about like, oh, it's like this child's party. It was so cool. It was like they had a blast. They're like really into this. They're probably like 7 or 8. All these stories that we start to tell. And yet there's another one that's called KFC. And KFC is like clearly a meal that happened alone in bed, with like chicken bones that are sitting on a plate. And this is a whole different feel that happens to it, and yet it's also in the sort of aftermath of a meal that just happened. And again, we know so much about that person, even though we see no person there. And the way that he comes to do this whole series is that he's thinking, he had just been to Europe, and he had seen for the first time in person the Dutch masters' paintings of still lives. And he was thinking about how, you always have these types of things. You have these beautiful still lives, and they talk about the fleetingness of life, and they want to show flowers that are decaying, or because they want to talk about how like all of this is like our mortality is right here. And Chuck Ramirez thinks about, okay, what does a contemporary Vanitas look like? What does a contemporary still life look like if it was happening now, but the same sorts of ideas that are guiding it? But the shift that he does is that he's less focused on how we signal like the fleetingness of life, and more focused on the celebration of life and the celebration of now. And so all of these things feel over the top. All these things feel joyous. They feel very personal. They feel like we have insight into the people who were participating. And it doesn't feel sad in the same way. It feels like I wish I had been invited to that party. And this is part of what he's going for, and it's part of how he also is thinking about, okay, there are these traditions that exist. I'm always aware of these different traditions, but then how do I update that for now, and how do I update that for an audience that I'm interested in engaging with? And so this is where that shift starts to happen in this series. And then the final series that folks will encounter as they are walking through is also in this space, and it's called the candy trays. And there are a handful of them, but this one, Godiva 2, you can see presented here. It's big, presented real big. And what's funny with this gesture here is that it's just a candy tray. And it's funny because when Godiva goes and they do their fancy candy tray, it's like the thinnest plastic, it's disposable, and yet it's gold. It's like the weirdest collision of high glamour and like fanciness, and then also like the cheapest plastic that you could possibly get away with that will still actually hold these things. And part of what he's saying is that there is beauty all around us. There's beauty in the fact that like when we are consuming this and it's a delicious little thing to eat, that we then get to the end of it and we have this fake gold, but it's gold tray that's there, and he just simply puts it on a white background, elevates it in that way, and then photographs it, and then blows it up real big, and all of a sudden we're like, pretty cool, and pretty lovely. And this is one of the things that like, is consistent across his work. So whether he is talking about a thing that is on a store shelf that you are thinking about wanting to purchase, if it is something that has been hanging out in your grandmother's house for all this time, if it's something that somebody's been sweeping on, like out on the front stoop for years and years, or if it is something that is really meant to just be tossed aside, if it is just the detritus of every day, that he is able to point out the beauty in it. And this is the Chuck Ramirez special there, that he is always able to have us pause. He's able to say, look, life is actually more sort of miraculous than you think it is. And this is how I'm going to prove it. I'm going to show you something that is so banal, and yet when you see it in the space, it will stop you in your tracks. So you're like, oh, maybe I should go buy some more Godiva, just like throw out that chocolate and just like get this put on my wall. There's something powerful about that, and it's something that is consistent across Chuck Ramirez's practice, and it's one of the ways that he gets us to really care and really lock into what we're seeing. Okay. One final note is that in the sort of middle space, where the piñatas and the start of the 7-day series is, we will have an engagement, because we want people to be able to do a little bit of this on their own. And so we're doing a thing called pocket portraits, and it will be a little light box that's set up there, and folks will be invited to take whatever's in their pockets, set it over there, and take a little photo of themselves so that they can do a little bit of Chuck Ramirez looking at their everyday and thinking about how they can relate to these different objects. I left a little bit of time for questions. Anybody have any?